over 2.6 million residents in our region, and that is continuing to very quickly grow. So within NVRC, we address a number of different programs and challenges within this region. So you can just see some of those examples on the slide here. But if you've been up in Northern Virginia as of late, you know that it is a very commuter-heavy region. We depend on our roads, sidewalks, bridges, etc., to be able to function and carry on daily, no matter the time of year. And that also goes for things like our emergency services, our school buses, all of those things that depend on our roads being cleared pretty quickly and safely. So with that being said, especially this time of year, winter salt is a significant topic of conversation within our region. We know that both within Northern Virginia and throughout the United States, really, we have had increases in salt usage, again, to make sure that we have public safety and then economic activity can continue in the winter months. But as we've been seeing that increase in salt applications to our roads and other surfaces, we've also been very clearly able to see the impacts that it has on our environment, our drinking water systems, as well as our infrastructure. So just to give a little bit more detail in that, you can see on the right-hand side there, that is a very clear increasing trend in sodium levels of the Occoquan Reservoir. That is one of our primary drinking water sources for Northern Virginia. And the Occoquan has a monitoring lab as well as a treatment plant. And they've been doing a lot of significant work in looking at the environmental impacts, so increases in stream and even groundwater salinity over the past few decades, as well as the impacts to aquatic life. So some of those freshwater species can't even handle very small adjustments in salinity in the water. So looking at things like how fish are being impacted by rising salinity levels, but also things like freshwater plants, other aquatic organisms that are easily stressed by it. For the Occoquan Reservoir in particular, we're also looking at those impacts to actual drinking water. It's very, very expensive and difficult to take salt out of water, which is why our neighboring states, well, particularly those further out west, it's not an easy solution just to get water right from the ocean. We know that it takes a lot of time, money, maintenance to desalinize those water sources. So we have to take a, prevention focused mindset of this. Again, we don't want our drinking water reservoirs to have to go through that process. We also don't want people to come to Northern Virginia and note that the water tastes a little bit salty. And then there's even concerns for things like public health for those that are on low sodium diets, those types of things. So all different components that our drinking water authorities are thinking about. But then also thinking about infrastructure impacts, we know that winter salt has corrosive behavior towards vehicles, roads, bridges, and other types of infrastructure. I think AAA had a cost estimate that for any salt-related repair to a vehicle, it's about $500. I don't think we see this as much in our region and in the DMV in general, but with some of the northern states, such as like New Hampshire and Minnesota, I know it is a concern for vehicle owners and how much that cost is over time. And so all in all, as I mentioned, we are seeing these impacts, and there are different attributes to that rising salinity. We know that there's other components to increasing salt levels, but we are able to see very specific spikes in the winter months after winter storm events. So we are able, in many cases, able to point to winter salt as that primary point. And so I did want to note that, this isn't just within Northern Virginia. We are seeing these trends elsewhere. So as I mentioned, we see this throughout the United States, but DEQ also conducts chloride testing across the Commonwealth, mainly through benthic monitoring. And on the right-hand side here, you can see some of those sites within your region. I will say, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, though, that these are not tested regularly. They don't go out testing right after winter storms. Usually it's sometime in the spring and then again in the fall when you're not necessarily going to detect those spikes from winter salt again. But just wanted to show this here that there is data out there, and we are looking at chloride stressors throughout the state. And then again, as I mentioned, we are also looking at impacts from other salt sources. Despite seeing spikes from winter salt in particular, we know that things like reclaimed water, treatment chemicals, even things like our laundry detergent have pretty significant salt content. So there are groups like Virginia Tech and UVA that are looking at those impacts of other sources and compounding factors there. So with that being said, looking into Northern Virginia, again, I mentioned the benthic monitoring. Monitoring conducted in the Accotink Creek watershed, which is kind of that brown outline there, indicated that chlorides, hydromodification, habitat modification, and sediment were the most probable stressors to biological communities. Additional testing conducted found that that exceeded the aquatic life, chronic, and acute water quality standards. And so after that testing was conducted, they decided that they needed a total maximum daily load, or TMDL, which is essentially a pollution diet set for the watershed. This was finalized in 2017 for both sediment and chloride causing benthic impairments, and it was approved by EPA in May 2018. And I bring this up due to the fact that this was actually the first chloride TMDL in Virginia. So when we were thinking about how to go about implementation of this TMDL pollution diet, it's not like there was really a foundation or blueprint for us within the state of Virginia. We can, again, look to other states and how they're addressing it, but when we were thinking about completion of the TMDL and how to reduce salt loads, it kind of took a creative approach from DEQ and other stakeholders. So in the end, they decided that instead of having a regulatory approach saying we need to directly track all salt loads, which, as you can imagine, would be really difficult to be able to monitor and track and implement in general. DEQ and those stakeholders decided that taking a more voluntary and largely proactive approach to reducing salt loads would be the most effective way to go about it. And so in the development of the salt management strategy, SAMS, they took essentially three primary goals to addressing this. First was using a stakeholder-driven process. So they weren't just looking at how localities would be implementing the strategy. They wanted to have the public involved, private contractors, et cetera, which I'll talk about a little bit more. Kind of going hand in hand with that, they also wanted to be able to increase public awareness and promote positive winter salt behaviors. This is where it kind of goes into those different audience types, conducting a pretty wide range of education and outreach. And then leading into that third goal, which is maintaining the balance between public safety and winter salt impacts reduction. recognizing that we can't tell the public to just not apply any salt in the first place, but instead applying the correct amount, where again, you're reducing the winter salt impacts, those impacts on the environment, infrastructure, and drinking water. So what this led to, this is a 2-year process. As I mentioned, a number of stakeholders involved, several different work groups that were created for it, as well as several public meetings, led to a 400-page toolkit that I won't go over into that much detail, but I have a link to it in my last slide if you feel like you would like to review it. But in general, you can see the key sections that were developed for it. And really, we try to think of it as kind of like an a la carte option for addressing winter salt impacts. A big point of it, which I'll talk about in a slide or two, is addressing best management practices, those for anybody from the winter maintenance professionals, either with the locality or private contractors, down to tools for businesses or other groups that even just contract those services. So really combining that technical education with outreach, public education. Again, you can see those key sections, anything from how to go about water quality monitoring to effective government coordination, as well as future research needs and funding sources. So again, I could just talk about the toolkit probably for a solid hour, but I'll spare you all. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions about those particular sections. But I did just want to highlight the best management practices a little bit to this group. I think the toolkit does a really good job of breaking them down, and something that has been difficult and was especially difficult when considering the toolkit was that level of incentive, because it's not regulatory. You cannot necessarily mandate any groups to be accomplishing all of these practices. But we found that the best kind of carrot stick approach was cost savings. Applying salt correctly, going through these best management practices, down to things like level of service and meetings, would save you money in the long term. And so when they developed the toolkit, they broke out the best management practices into either planning or storm related. And then they broke it down even further based off of audience type. So anybody from all audiences to transportation audiences, and then property management audiences as well. So on the right-hand side here, you can see examples of planning BMPs. This includes things like pre-season meetings. A big one that we focus on is calibration, and then also identifying areas for ongoing accountability and having it be an iterative learning process. So you can see the BMP there on the left-hand side, but then it also shows the potential costs as well as the cost savings. And then on the far right-hand side there, you can see partnering opportunities. So if there's a way to potentially save additional money, if there's a group that you could potentially work with, the toolkit wanted to highlight these so that in certain cases you're not reinventing the wheel, or you can look to experts for some of these practices as well. So they provide this nice kind of chart within the beginning of the toolkit, but it has full appendices that break down these BMPs further, talk about the potential costs in greater detail, as well as those organizations. So I always encourage anybody that's kind of interested in learning a little bit more to be able to go into those appendix items and better understand where the BMP could fit within their capacity and resources. And then also just showing the first was planning, second, storm-related best management practices. These are really the actions that you're taking during and after a winter storm, talking about different de-icing materials, and then recording and tracking of materials. Again, nobody is necessarily going to follow up with you and ask, how much material did you use during this ice storm? But over time, you would hope that if you're applying these practices correctly, you won't need to lose or use as much material, and you're saving money, but you're still effectively applying salt. And you can see some of the example equipment on the right-hand side, anything from kind of a handheld spreader to a full truck. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions about these at the end, but it's a really comprehensive approach. I think the one area that it didn't address, just because of how quickly technology has changed, has been brining. So also happy to answer any questions about that practice at the end. But if you're not familiar, if you look on the road before a winter storm, those streaks that you see, it's a combination of water and salt. It tends to be a little bit more environmentally friendly, but when this was produced back in 2020, they didn't even have that much information about it at the time. So it also kind of goes to show how quickly these practices have been changing. And so again, I have a link to the toolkit and the toolkit summary at the end of these slides. So I'll let you take a look at that in your own time. But the toolkit was finalized in December 2020. At that time, DEQ transitioned to a more supporting role, and NVRC became the primary facilitator for SAM's implementation. For those of you working with TJPDC or other PDCs regularly, you recognize that having a planning district kind of take on this role made a lot of sense, because they're able to communicate out to all the jurisdictions with consistent messaging, hopefully reducing the burden on certain localities that didn't have the capacity or resources to implement the program quite as much. And then NVRC also had some programs already existing, such as the Northern Virginia Clean Water Partners, that helped with programming as well. And so now I'm just going to go into some of the activities that we have been completing over the past few years. I should mention that when the toolkit was finalized in 2020, NVRC didn't receive any initial funding from DEQ to implement these activities until I haven't been moving for like 20 minutes now. We didn't receive any funding from DEQ until almost 2023, 2024. So again, a lot of these programs relied on pre-existing funds, one of which was the Northern Virginia Clean Water Partners. This is a program where all of our localities pool funding together to help satisfy MS4, MCM1, and MCM2 public education and outreach requirements. So we were already doing a fair amount of engagement relating to other high priority stormwater pollution issues like bacteria, nutrients, illicit discharge, etc. So it's pretty easy for us to just kind of integrate salt into our existing work. But you can see some example social media posts, videos that we have on the right-hand side there. This has definitely evolved over the past few decades since the program was developed in, I think, 2003. So the Clean Water Partners now has various social media pages, a website, we produce videos, and I have links to some of these different pages at the end as well, just to give inspiration. And then I like to always reiterate that this information and these images, etc., are open for public use, and we want to make it as easy as possible for others to be able to share this type of information without having to recreate the wheel. We've also been working on different trainings and educational events. So we did receive a small pot of funds in 2022 to host a training program for private contractors. So these are those types of either landscaping groups or professional winter salt management businesses that would be contracted by like a commercial property owner, an HOA, essentially a non-resident specific property. And so we gave a full day training to them on those best management practices. But we also have been working towards, better training events with our localities. So this past fall, we actually worked with Chesapeake Bay Landscaping Council, for those of you that are familiar with CBLC. They came to Prince William County and hosted a smart salting training for all of their county maintenance and public school maintenance staff, which was great. And so I think I have a link to them as well. But again, really trying to provide those opportunities for our localities to better understand those best management practices, how they can improve operations. CBLC actually had them bring one of their salting trucks and taught them how to calibrate it on the spot. So again, those types of practices that they wouldn't necessarily gain from just reading the toolkit as well. We also have events like Winter Salt Week and then other presentations. And then, as I mentioned, we did receive funding from DEQ in 2024. So we've been working to collaborate with our localities. We host monthly meetings with our jurisdictions and other partners to discuss their winter salt operations. But we've also been creating materials like the snow and ice maintenance resource sheet for HOAs and civic associations, as you can see on the right-hand side there. They've been a pretty big audience group that we've been trying to better target over the past few years. So we gave them essentially this sheet so that they could have all the tools and information in front of them to either develop a salt policy, a better salt contract, down to education and outreach resources, like if they wanted to send out an e-newsletter at the beginning of every winter season. So it's been a fair amount of collaboration with our jurisdictions and at a regional scale with some other partners, but I should always mention that our localities also do a lot of fantastic programming. I won't go through all of these, but just some highlights here. So Prince William County, as I mentioned, they did that training for their maintenance and public school staff this past October. They've also been pretty heavily involved in monitoring of shopping centers. If you've seen those pretty large salt piles in front of a commercial building, they are required to be covered. And it tends to be a challenge, especially this time of year. So they do a fair amount of tracking of that. Arlington County has a lot of fun programs, one of which is a real-time like snowplow tracker map. I'm sure that was incredibly useful about 2 or so weeks ago when people were very eagerly waiting to see if the snowplow was going to come onto their street. But part of that was also a naming contest, which made it fun for kids too. I know some localities also have like snowplow painting competitions, etc. You'll notice that in several of these jurisdictions, they also have different water quality monitoring programs. Arlington County does Salt Watch, which I'll mention in a minute. Fairfax County, because they are part of the Accotink Creek watershed, they have more specific requirements for water quality monitoring, but City of Fairfax partners with George Mason University with students for water quality monitoring as well. So they do go about it in some different ways. But my point is that, as I mentioned in the beginning, DEQ only monitors chloride at specific times of the year for things like benthic monitoring. But our jurisdictions are able to have volunteers go out and do it right after winter storms and at other various points in the year, which makes it a little bit more helpful to be able to understand the impacts of winter salt on their locality. So with that being said, I'm going to jump forward one slide to talk about it. Salt Watch is a program from the Izaak Walton League of America, and it's been running for a number of years now, but this is a free program where Izaak Walton League will send chloride test strips where you can monitor your local creek or stream or any other water body that you want. Typically, our localities will have volunteers go out and do it, but you can see the little test strip on the left-hand side there. Super easy to complete. I think like having a Boy Scout troop or similar is a great resource. But then you could also go and then upload that data onto the SaltWatch map. And so you can see some examples on the right-hand side. It looks like a fair amount for your region, but you should note that that start date is from 2020. So I don't think there's been too much data collection over the past few years. I think when I looked for like 2025 to 2026, but again, this is a super easy resource to have. So if you are curious about your locality, if there's a particular stream that you have of interest, it's super easy to get involved. I'm going to jump back one slide here and also just talk about some locality-based SAMS opportunities. I mentioned integration with MS4 activities. This has been one of the easiest ways for our localities to go about SAMS implementation, whether that's sharing materials on their website and newsletters on their own social media, in addition to the Clean Water Partners. We've also been trying to increase coordination around social media posting like right before winter storms. So again, when that storm happened in January, I think I went on like that Friday before, and it was impressive to see the number of posts from all of our localities and then even other regions of the state at that point for the storm event. I mentioned the trainings and winter salt operations. And again, I have the link to CBLC on the last slide. Having those in-person training opportunities for locality maintenance staff to learn how to properly calibrate their equipment, how to track their salt applications, it really helps ingrain those BMPs that the toolkit highlights. And then lastly, just that community level engagement that I mentioned, having the water quality monitoring through the SaltWatch program, having salt pile reporting and tracking, and just general tracking and monitoring of salt piles with associated messaging to commercial property groups has been really beneficial. And a great example of a result of that is Prince William County had a salt pile that they noted, I think it was at like outside of a Planet Fitness, but they did water quality monitoring directly downstream of that salt pile that was uncovered and had pretty high spikes. But after they asked the property group to cover the pile, you could see a dramatic increase. So it does go to show that, taking these practices, even if it is step by step and at a smaller scale, can be really beneficial to the overall health of the environment. I mentioned SaltWatch. And then NVRC has been working with the other PDCs to help implement various aspects of SAMS. Again, the salt issue is not specific to Northern Virginia. So we're working with them. We'll be developing kind of a easy social media toolkit where the PDCs and other localities can have templates for sharing information. We are hoping to increase, some of these activities that we've been completing within Northern Virginia at a state scale in the future. Even just things like Winter Salt Week programming, which very easy to share information, and actually having Winter Salt Week is currently in the Virginia legislative session to be every year. As well as other statewide education activities. And then I mentioned those various resource sheets like the HOA, fact sheet, some of the other infographics, etc., are open for anybody's use. So sharing those out as well. And with that, I'll just close out by again sharing all of the various resources that I mentioned. We also have things like snow and ice management tip sheets for property managers as well as residents. Those links to social media pages, and then of course the link to the SAMS toolkit as well. So if there's any other resources that I mentioned that I did not include on here, happy to share those out. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And happy to have any questions, but also would be curious to hear, if there's any components to the program that you feel like you'd be interested in implementing within your locality, or any barriers as well. I'm always interested to hear more. So with that, I will stop talking. And yeah, again, happy to answer any questions or hear from you all. Yeah, Laurel.
Hi, Rebecca. I work for Albemarle County. I have a question for you. I didn't hear you talk about VDOT, I don't think. So I'm wondering, do most of these localities maintain their own streets?
It depends on the street. VDOT does maintain a number of roads within our region. So we do coordinate with VDOT. I mentioned that we have like that monthly coordination call with our localities that VDOT typically sits in on. As you all likely know, VDOT tends to have their own operations. And so we do work with them, but they've also been doing a number of other types of programming, etc. I should note that I mentioned Winter Salt Week in current legislative sessions, but within this legislative session as well, there is a bill going through for VDOT to conduct a study on salt alternatives for their roads and be able to share that. I think the due date for sharing that study would be November of this year. So it passed in the Senate, and then it's still moving through. So I think there is a good chance of it being completed. So I would keep a lookout for that as well. Which should be a little bit more public information about some of the activities that they've been completing.
So do you think that the SAMS process has had any impact on VDOT and what their practices are? Or were they already kind of working towards more brining and reducing salt use?
Yeah, they've been trying to upgrade their technologies and their practices. I know that they were involved in SAM's development in the first place, but I know that they, again, have been working towards further training a lot of the best management practices that are within the toolkit as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, if there's not, I just wanted to say thank you again for joining our region to share your expertise and all of these great resources. I know I'm really looking forward to the rest of the outreach kit that's coming out so we can share more with our region. Yeah, thank you again. And feel free to hop off or stay, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, I'll hop off, but yeah, thank you all again. I really appreciate it. I'll send the PowerPoint over to you, Isabella, afterwards. So Yeah, feel free to contact me if you have any additional questions, and fingers crossed it stays in the 50s from here on out. I think I'm a little tired of the snow at this point, so I'm sure others are as well. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
And I'll
you.
be sure to share the presentation out to everybody so you all can review that.
Great. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. So for the TJPDC updates today, I'm just going to keep it pretty brief. I'm a bit under the weather today, but I know we'll have a lot more at the next meeting. So for our septic assistance program, it looks like DEQ is going to be extending that grant period from March 2026 to March of 2027. So just more time to kind of expend the rest of our funding after some delays in getting the grant contracts out. And just as a refresher for anyone who's not familiar, that program helps to fund septic BMPs or best management practices with low income homeowners in the rural parts of the region. So we'll do maintenance, repairs, replacements, and connection to public sewer. And at this point in time, we've expended almost 60% of the implementation funds or allocated it towards projects that are in the works right now. So that's about 81,000 of our 140,000 towards implementation projects. And as of
Isabella,
now,
can I
Yep.
can I ask a question about that program? Is
Mhm.
that in a particular region or watershed, or is it just throughout the PDC's jurisdictional area?
so it is just in our planning district commission.
Yeah.
But it's across the entire region.
Okay, I'm just thinking about the overlap with the program that the county is still doing through our housing department or housing, yeah, department. So we're also doing septic to sewer, and I just kind of like wonder if there's like opportunities for, I don't know, collaboration of any kind, or
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I wasn't even aware that you guys were doing this program, or had forgotten, I guess.
Yeah, partnership has been a pretty important part of this program, and we're working with the local housing foundations to get the word out. But we have partnered with the local soil and water conservation districts for their kind of watershed specific septic funding to ensure that that funding is used first. And then if there's any additional homeowner need on top of that, then we kind of come in to fill the gaps. And so far, none of the funding has been allocated towards Albemarle because I'm pretty sure just because of the relationship the housing foundations have with your local grant program, it hasn't really, they haven't come into conflict with each other. And we also point people in the direction of that program if necessary, because I know that one kind of, it's there, so that funding should definitely be allocated first.
Yeah,
But there's
okay.
no other funding to support the areas outside of those implementation watersheds. So we're kind of helping to fill that gap in other parts of the region.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. But as of now, that funding source won't be available for the next year. But we're waiting to hear from DEQ if that will change again in the future, because they've restricted that funding from, instead of being across all of the PDCs in Virginia, it's limited to the most effective basins or the MEB areas, which is more so on the coast or up north in the urbanized areas of Virginia.
Okay.
So, and then just wanted to share in the chat our schedule for our spring rain barrel workshops that we do in partnership with the localities here in the James River Association. I don't think James River Association has made the registrations live, but when they are live, it'll be posted on our Facebook and through the TJPDC newsletter. We have 3 this season, and we will have the additional workshops in the rest of the region in the fall to cover everybody. But that is really all I have for today. If anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I just wanted to open it up to you all for the roundtable to see if there's anything that you'd like to share about exciting things going on in your localities, or if you have any suggestions for topics for an upcoming meeting, I would love to hear them.
I have to hop off for another meeting, but just wanted to say that was a really interesting presentation and looking forward to our next check-in.
Thanks, Tori. Appreciate it.
Laurel, I wonder if anybody would be interested in a Biscuit Run stream restoration update. I forget when we last met. I guess it was about a quarter ago. But yeah.
Sure, I'm happy to. So for anyone who's not familiar, Albemarle County has done a 1 mile long stream restoration in the Biscuit Run Park, which is just south of Charlottesville. It's a restoration that's kind of unique and somewhat new style, where basically the existing eroded stream is the water level brought up by a series of what we call log jams, which are basically little dams that are spaced closely together. So it's kind of like a string of pearls if you look at it from the sky. It was finalized in terms of construction this fall, actually right before the holidays, I think. And the planting is going to be happening within the next month or so. And we are working with our Parks and Rec department to kind of transition to a maintenance program for that property, because it is very large and will require lots of invasives management and probably some replanting over the next few years. But we're very excited about it. It's going to be doing a big load for us in terms of reducing sediment into the Moores Creek watershed. Biscuit Run runs into Moores Creek, which then goes into the Ravenna, and is also contributing a lot to our Chesapeake Bay TMDL waste load allocations. So we're excited about it. We're especially excited by the impact it will have on wildlife, because it's created a lot of new wetlands that weren't there before, a lot of still water that wasn't there before, that will be really good for amphibians, especially, I think, and bird life. And we'll see. We've got a couple trail cameras out there to try to see what kind of animals come out. We already see signs of beavers, so they're probably going to move in pretty steadily, I would think, in the next year or two.
That is so exciting. And remind me, that's with a DEQ grant that's funded?
Yes, so county funding, City of Charlottesville also is contributing a big chunk of it. So financially speaking, this is a city-county project, and also the city is taking credit for some of the nutrient reductions as well, because they also need to achieve pollution reductions for the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, but they have very little land to do projects on. So it's kind of a win-win for both of us.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I was going to ask, like, what kind of brought about all of the support for this level of project, but maybe it is just the TMDL and needing to meet those pollution reductions.
That's probably the primary driver. What do you think, Greg?
Certainly, yeah, our pollution reduction obligations under the Chesapeake Bay TMDL was the thing that, you know, allowed us to have the resources to do the project in the first place. And we selected the site just because there was really great alignment with this new park coming online. Even though the watershed is fairly forested today, historically it hasn't been, so there's a lot of legacy impacts that we're still seeing today. The stream itself was horribly incised, not very healthy. Yeah, we just saw this as a great opportunity to do something that people could actually see, and not do something kind of tucked away somewhere where there wasn't any foot traffic. So it's going to be great as far as like public engagement years into the future. In fact, there's a kickoff meeting tomorrow for a big bridge, pedestrian bridge, that is going to span the part of the stream that we restored. So there'll be a great vantage point for people to actually see the stream. And then if you're in the park, you can kind of see, if you go upstream a ways, you could kind of see where the restoration project ends, and it looks like it, has looked, which is not good. So you could kind of make that mental comparison. And anyway, so there were things that just kind of like aligned that made this our choice project for the last few years.
That makes a lot of sense. That's really exciting. I go down to the Pleasant Grove Park a lot, living in Savannah County, and just over the last few years of storms, have watched how much it's changed. And there's just such a big section of the river that's so publicly accessible. I'm like, that would be such a cool place to do a really big stream restoration project. So I just find it really inspiring what you guys are doing there, and I want to go check it out. I think that bridge would be like a perfect place for some signage, which you guys I'm sure already have lined up. But
Yeah, and some bungee jumping too.
there we go. Well, thanks for that update. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share?
Well, if we're talking streams, I'll just briefly mention that the county's draft riparian buffer ordinance, which is moving the buffer requirements out of the water protection ordinance and into the zoning ordinance, so that they apply to all properties rather than just properties with development projects. Recently had a planning commission hearing that went better than I expected, and is going to be going to the board. We don't have a date for the board consideration for adoption, but I can imagine it's going to be in the next few months that hopefully that'll be coming forward for final action.
That's very exciting. Yeah, I know that one's been in the works for a while, so I'm excited to see that and hopefully learn more about it sometime soon. Alrighty. Well, if we don't have any other updates, I will give you all these 30 minutes back, but really appreciate your time and just you continuing to be here. Yeah, and I guess for the next meeting, May 21st, I'll see you guys back. It'll be a hybrid meeting, but I encourage you to come to the office to see the new renovations. I'm very excited about them.
Nice.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you
Hope you
so
feel
much.
better.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.